Hey there, Geek and Executioner. Today we're reviewing the Lamb movie. The weird one with the weird poster. Hope you're ready. Okay, so if you were on YouTube at any time in the past, I don't know how many months, they were teasing and trailering this film that was done in Icelandic language, called Lamb, and it was shown to be like a horror story. It stars Numi Rapace, who is our main character, Maria, and then we have two other main characters, which are her husband, Ingvar. I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing that, and Peter. Our other two characters are Peter, who is Numi Rapace's brother-in-law, Maria. His name is Bjorn Hilnir Haraldsson. I have to write it down. And we also have Ingvar, who is Hilmar Snare Gudnason. My Icelandic is terrible, obviously. So here's how the movie starts off. We get an introduction of our characters, and there's a lot of limited dialogue in the first part of the film. But our opening shot is in the dead of winter. We see horses that are trying to huddle together to stay away from the winter's cold. We see the sheep that are in the barn where they're located. And it's a pretty harsh winter. Not harsh enough where it could kill them, but, bad enough. And Maria and her husband are celebrating Christmas because on the radio you start hearing a radio broadcast saying Merry Christmas. Let's see. Eventually we go into some more scenes of farming life. It starts off pretty slow, but then we see a sheep being born. The first birth is normal. I should say hooves and head first. Then the rest of it comes out, and then the sheep begins to nurse, and eventually is able to walk and what have you. The next we'll get into that. The next lamb that's being born has a bit of a difficulty, and with a little more pulling, the lamb finally comes out, and it's something off about this animal. But Ingvar and Maria take it inside, start nursing it like a newborn infant, wrap it up, and even start pulling out the old crib that they had in their home, in their garage, I should say. Now, if you were ever wondering if this has some kind of weird humanoid animal, well, yeah, it does. They don't shy away from showing what the lamb is, Ada, that they eventually name her. It's literally a child, a human child, but it has the right arm is really a sheep's hoof, and then it has the head of a sheep. And I find it interesting that the film wanted to go that route. Now, in nature, there are always anomalies. You have parasitic twins, you have humans and animals with cyclopia. You have people born with extra heads, extra limbs. It's all kinds of stuff that happens in nature. They are anomalies, but some people are able to live with them. Some people are able to, remove them. So even though this was a animal anomaly, it was still an animal. It still came from the womb of a fully grown ewe. So we have already established that Maria and Ingvar have taken their new child from another mother, and eventually we start seeing some issues. But I did want to talk about how some animals have greater connections with their offspring than others. So if you've ever looked at squirrels, I think squirrels only get about a couple of weeks with their newborns and then they just abandon them. Whereas other animals, but I believe squirrels are more in the rodent family. Um, but mammals, a lot of mammals will take more time with their animals than other types of animals. So, for example, marsupials. In the case of lingering danger, like a dingo running after a quokka, for example, the quokka will loosen its muscles in the pouch and allow the joey to slip out because it makes sense biologically to allow the joey to fall out and die and become dingo food than the adult female quokka, because she can just have another baby. Whereas mammals have taken on the ability to say, hey, no, I need to protect my offspring. Even though my life would be at risk, I want my child's life to flourish. So we see differences in how a lot of animals behave when it comes to offspring and the connections to offspring. And I wouldn't deny that the sheep that they took the lamb from had that same connection. Now, I did note that the lamb's mother does not have a name. It's labeled with a number 3115. The lamb would have been given another number had it just come out as a normal looking lamb, but instead they give her the name Ada. And we'll get into that, but Ada is the first Ada died. Let's just put it that way. So, we got through the process of the kidnapping. We're getting to that. So they take the lamb, the mom gets upset. The mom eventually starts coming to the house and pretty much saying, where's my baby? You took my baby. So eventually they shoo 3115 away. And then while they're not looking, she comes and gets her baby. How? Who knows? But she comes and gets the baby. And they find her and they take Ada from 3115. And then they pretty much exile her from the farm. And I mean, Maria just screams, go away in Icelandic in a very harsh way. And I find it interesting how the mindset of humanity is that you would only feel a certain way if she was human. You don't really care that she's a lamb or that she's a sheep. So I found that interesting, that she thought it was okay to take this woman's, or I'm calling her a woman, but take this sheep's baby. But anyway, the sheep mom comes back and Maria gets upset, takes what I believe is for a human, it would be the equivalent of one of those, sort of like the handheld gun from It, where it was just like shot in the head. I don't know what kind of gun it is, but I'm pretty sure it's a pressure gun. It delivers a deadly blow to, say, a sheep, but to a human, you would have to shoot in a vital area like the jugular for it to cause damage. But pretty much she kills the sheep, the ewe, and that ends that. And she buries the mom. So I also thought that it was interesting because domesticated animals are like a halfway point between nature and civilization. And I've lived in a farming community before. It's a very interesting way of life. It's very simple and you need wide open space. So there's a lot of isolation involved. And one of the things about nature is that it is brutal. So whether you're an animal or a human living in nature, there are some things that you just can't control. I will skip ahead to this part because I think it's important to note the original Ada was a human girl who belonged to Ingvar and Maria, and she died. And there's a grave where Maria is praying at, and the lamb Ada, is in the distance watching, but they eventually go back to their normal lives. But one thing I found interesting is that some animals will reject their young in certain circumstances or even kill them. I know that wolverines will give birth to, who knows, maybe up to 50 pups, or I should say joeys, because Australian. They'll give birth to 50 pups but only have four teats to feed for a baby, so the others will pretty much have to compete to get to the teats or they'll die. And in some cases they'll even eat the young to help produce milk. So what's interesting about this lamb mother, this ewe, is that she never abandoned Ada. She never killed her. She never rejected her. Her baby was taken. Her death was out of cruelty, not of nature's cruelty, but of humans' cruelty. And Maria would probably argue that nature was cruel to her because her baby was taken from her by nature. But there's a difference between the first Ada's death and the second Ada's kidnapping. Your baby died because she died. You didn't reject her. She just expired. You then took another mother's baby from her, and then you killed her. That's vile. So one of the interesting things that happens in Lamb is that they say that Ada is a new beginning. That's closer to the third act. And then before we get to the third act, we go through a lot of things. We go through happy time with Ingvar and Maria. We go through the brother-in-law coming into town and almost killing her. He thinks that he literally asks, "What is that?" Peter, by the way. Peter comes in and says, "What is that?" Ingvar says, "Happiness." Peter also gets dropped off in the trunk of a car. That says a lot about where he is in life. So Peter has a difficult time with this animal hybrid. And like I said, he once tried to kill her, but then decides not to. And somehow warms up to Ada. What caused this transition, who knows, but maybe it was because he ended up seeing Maria happy and his brother happy. I believe that it is implied at some point in the movie that Maria and Peter had a sexual relationship. It's possible that maybe the issue isn't a problem with Maria's fertility, but maybe her husband's sperm and the weakness of his sperm. So it's possible that at some point maybe they had an affair to try to get her pregnant, and he just took it a little too far. But what eventually happens is Peter has to leave. He tries to come on to Maria after a handball game. I don't know the rules of handball except it's handball, and you try to use your hands instead of your feet like you would with football/soccer. I didn't bother to look up the rules of that. But anyway, by the time they finish the game, Peter tries to hit on her. She ends up having to lock him into the room. Otherwise, he was going to tell that they had an affair. And she eventually gets him locked in the room. She grabs money that she had been stowing away, and she buys him a bus ticket and sends him on a bus back to, I guess, the nearest city, wherever he's from. While she's doing that with Peter, Ingvar and Ada are walking around. They're at the tractor at first and they're trying to fix it. And the tractor is eventually abandoned down the hill earlier in the film because, of course, it is. And there's no repairman anywhere. But eventually they figure it's no use and they start to go back home. And nature had already sent a premonition. Actually, it sent two. The first premonition was a dream that Maria has in I believe the first act. And in the first act, Maria's dream is that the sheep look like they're possessed with demons or some other kind of spirit. And she gets really uneasy, but continues with the raising of Ada. And then Ada gets not a premonition, really, more like foreshadowing for us. Which is, actually I take that back. There are 3 premonitions because Peter gets a premonition. He's asleep on the couch when he first arrives. And as he wakes up, he sees what looks like an older humanoid sheep person. That's his premonition. And then finally, it's Ada's premonition. I don't know why they chose not to give Ingvar a premonition, but that's what ends up happening. Ada's premonition is actually a real situation where there is this humanoid ram that's looking at her. She gets scared and she runs in to her dad. Towards the end of the film, like I said, Ingvar and Ada are together after trying to fix the tractor and it doesn't work. And the ram has broken into the house, taken the stun gun, and has shot Ingvar, I believe, twice. Once in the neck, like I said, in the jugular, and then another which knocks him down. So Ada is holding on to her dad as he is dying, and the ram comes over and takes her. And as he's trying to hold on to her, Ingvar, he's only able to hold on to the part of her that's still a lamb. And once that part just slips through, he dies. Eventually, Maria finds them because they're not at the house, and he's trying to almost talk to her with his dying breaths, but it's too late. They're not able to get medical attention. He's dead, and Ada's gone. Maria is trying to say, "Don't worry, it'll be okay. It'll be okay." And the scene shifts from that to Maria just kind of standing in this kind of gloomy, fallish weather. It's dark and it's windy. Well, not totally dark, but it's very rainy, very gloomy. She just takes a big breath, sighs, and then the film ends. So, low-key, when I was in the theater and I watched this, so many people in the audience was like, "For real?" And I just kind of laughed because in a way I kind of felt the same way, but then I was like, it's actually a perfect ending. I mean, sometimes life doesn't give you closure, and on top of that, you lost a child to nature and you didn't have that closure. So then you try to take something else's baby, trying to get closure from something that you still didn't get closure over, and then that child's taken. It's almost like that whole incident was to force her to accept things as they were, which is that the first baby's dead and the second kid's gone. But the loss was even greater this time. And it's nothing you can do except funeral preparations. Anyway, there were a couple of cute little Easter eggs that I figured out. One thing that I thought was interesting about this film is that Ingvar, usually in something like this, there's some kind of conflict between the two parents, but there wasn't. Ingvar never tries to stop Maria. They both pretty much took responsibility for their actions, and adopted this hybrid animal. They probably just both wanted to have their kid back. But there is a brief moment where Ingvar in the movie just kind of sobs, because maybe deep down he knows that this isn't the Ada that he wants, but it's almost like a replacement. When Peter comes in, he doesn't really advance the plot. He just kind of adds to the story. The plot doesn't really advance until Act 3, when that conflict between the humans comes to a halt, and the conflict between nature and people have to conclude. I found it interesting that nature made the Ram Man, because one thing that I think is that people don't get is that the Ram Man, like I said, was made from nature, as are humans. And these humans were capable of doing a great evil, but they also were capable of doing a great good. They didn't do a terrible job in raising Adam. So I would argue that the Ram Man took an act of revenge, but that doesn't mean he's incapable of empathy. I think this humanoid ram was sentient enough to understand that he's a product of destruction, but also a product of creation. It's not incapable of empathy. It's not incapable of doing any of that. I think he was created to be what Ada really needs. Someone like her. There's even a moment in the film where she's kind of looking around, wondering, where's my place in all of this? I mean, the only people she's ever met are her mom and her dad and her uncle. And that's something that I kind of question too. At what point were Maria and Peter going to wonder, like, how is she going to go to school? How is she going to have interactions with her kids? Because she needs some kind of interaction with other young people. She needs peers. If she goes through puberty, is it going to be like going through puberty like a actual girl, or is it going to be going through puberty like a sheep? You know, is she going to gravitate towards having relations with animals, or gravitate towards having relations with humans? And how would that work? Because she came from 2 sheep. So I think there were so many plot holes that, maybe not in the film, but just things that Maria and Ingvar just never wanted to accept, because they just wanted this child so bad, or they wanted to replace their kid so bad. So I did want to note that there were a couple of Easter eggs in this film as well. So this movie was made by A24, the production company that also did Midsummer, and there were a lot of Easter eggs to that film as well. So Maria makes Ada a crown of flowers, which is similar to the crown of flowers that the young lady gets in the movie Midsummer, which I'll probably also end up doing a review of as well. But there's a picture of Godiva on the wall. And Godiva is an old English folk tale of a woman who's married to a man who's taxing the people more than he needs to. So as an act of empathy towards the people, she, in some versions, it's just in her underdress, which for the English in a Christian society equaled nakedness. And then in some version, she's actually fully naked, and the only thing covering her, giving her modesty, was her hair. So that tale is actually, many historians believe that is connected to the traditions of the May Queen. The May Queen is what was a part of the influence of the cult in the film Midsummer. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But for the most part, Lamb is a really interesting film. It's not true horror. It's not a slasher film. It's not, it's definitely suspenseful at some points. But for the most part, it can be a little slow. If you're not into watching a lot of farming, not a lot of dialogue, it's just mostly a lot of emotion and a lot of feeling and a lot of trying to deal with a difficult situation. You might enjoy it. I might watch it again, unlike The Last Duel that I watched. I don't know if I'll watch it again. I might watch Adam Driver, fling around his cape. I'm like, okay. But for the most part, yeah. Lamb, I would recommend it. It's not a film that I would watch every now and again. Good Burger is one of those films that I watch to make me feel good. But it's definitely a film that makes you question why things are and look into how people cope with death, how they cope with the natural order of things, life cycles, and, how to deal with humanoid use. All right, there. Geek and Executioner. See ya.